Time now for our Friday Making a Difference report and the story of a man whose capacity for forgiveness is astonishing. He suffered the worst loss a parent can ever face, and yet he decided to turn his grief into something positive for himself and a troubled young man. Here's NBC's John Larson.
A documentary began the story like this.
14-year-old Tony Hicks shot and killed 20-year-old Khamisa.
A 14-year-old murders a promising young college student for the cost of a pizza and becomes the youngest child in California history charged as an adult with murder and gets life in prison.
It was like a nuclear bomb going off in my heart.
Azim Khamisa, the father of the victim, buried his only son Tariq according to their Muslim custom. He climbed down into the muddy grave. It had been raining, and they lowered his son's body wrapped in a white cloth down into his open arms.
Yeah, I didn't want to live there alone. I stayed there a long time. When something bad happens, you can stop that bad from happening to other people.
But when he finally came up, he did something remarkable.
It is wrong to lie, to cheat.
First, he forgave the family of the killer.
It was a defining moment in my life.
Only through that forgiveness,
which in turn helped Azim start the Tariq Khamisa Foundation, speaking together to more than 1 million children about the real pain of violence.
And sometimes it scars the soul forever.
Then, Azim visited Tony Hicks, the killer, who had never had a father, and forgave him too.
His forgiveness wasn't something I expected.
Now Azim is lobbying to have Tony released from prison early, like he was his own son.
And when he gets out of prison, what do you hope for him?
We'll have a job for him at the foundation.
So you're going to hire him?
Absolutely.
This is the killer of your son?
Yes.
Tony says now he knows what a real father is.
I had a man forgive me for taking the life of his son.
And he will work for that father, and for many who maybe never had fathers, someday, whether he gets out early or not. John Larson, NBC News, San Diego, California.
Thank you, Mark. A hand for our audio guy here. Good afternoon. As you can tell from the video, mine is more of a personal story as opposed to the very enlightening conversation we had with David. I have been an avid writer. I keep an active journal. I've authored 4 books, and I thought I might start my address to you this afternoon because we're talking about peace. I think we all want to get to peace. But how do you get to peace in all of the violence and the challenges we have, not only in our borders here, but on the planet? So I have a story to tell you about my journey, and maybe there are some applicable principles that we can apply from this story to create peace within us, within our communities, and hopefully within our world. I remember putting in my journal soon after Tariq passed away, there's nothing quite so painful as a broken heart. There's nothing quite so painful as a broken heart, but a broken heart is an open heart. If one can learn to live with an open heart, gentle transformations begin to happen. And I've been doing this work for 19 years, and I truly feel that part of my mission is to take those broken hearts and make them into open hearts. And one of my goals this afternoon is to open your hearts. I know many of you here at the Peace Conference already have an open heart, but there's no limit to how open our hearts can be. Why? Because an open heart can receive and transmit love more easily. And needless to say that my heart was broken wide open. I don't know what's more complicated in life than to lose a child. And I was born in Kenya. I was educated in England and actually moved to the United States in the aftermath of the violence of Idi Amin in neighboring Uganda, thinking that my children would be safe in the United States of America. So it was very ironic that Tariq was taken away on a street in a city and a country that I'd picked for him. And he was a good kid. He was a student at San Diego State University, and he worked as a pizza delivery man on Fridays and Saturdays. And make extra money for college. It was his turn to go deliver the pizzas. He was lured to a bogus address in the North Park area of San Diego, not far from where he went to school and not far from where he worked for a local Italian restaurant. And he knocked on several apartment doors to find out who'd ordered the pizzas. Of course, nobody had, so he came back to his car. He put the pizzas in the trunk of his car. And as he was about to leave the scene of the crime, he was accosted by 4 youth gang members. 3 of them were 14-year-old, and the leader of the gang was an 18-year-old who handed a 9mm handgun to a 14-year-old. And as my son is trying to drive his car from the driveway of the apartment building, the 18-year-old gave the order, "Bust him, Bones." Bones was his gang nickname, and he fired 1 round, which came through the driver's side window. It entered my son's body under the left shoulder blade. The bullet traveled across the upper part of his chest, and it exited from his right armpit. And as the coroner explained to me later, he said that the bullet followed a perfect path. A perfect path, I queried. I thought that was an interesting choice of words. But he's very quick to tell me, "Mr. Khamisa, I'm not trying to be insensitive. We do not see a path like this very often. And what it means in my lingo is that it destroyed all the vital organs in your son's body. And Tariq died, drowning in his own blood, a couple of minutes later over a lousy pizza at the age of 20. The sudden, senseless death of an innocent, unarmed human being. The overwhelming grief of a family. The total confusion as you try to absorb a new, hideous reality. And even though this tragedy happened 19 years ago, those early days are etched deeply on my mind, on my heart, and on my soul. And I remember one of the hardest things I've ever had to do was to call Tariq's mother. I live in San Diego. She lived in Seattle, Washington. So I had to do this on the telephone. How do you tell a mother that she's never, ever going to see her son again or hear him laugh or give him a hug. How do you do that? Tariq had a very special relationship with his mother. I have a very special relationship with my mother, and I'm certain many of you can relate. And it took me a while. And when she found out what had happened to Tariq, she let out this loud, piercing shriek as she fell to the floor. I could actually hear her hit the floor on the telephone. And I finished a very broken conversation with one of her brothers. Thank God she wasn't by herself. And as I retell this story, I can hear her shriek in my inner ear. It will probably haunt me for the rest of my life. Sometimes we don't quite get how painful violence is till it happens to us. At least I didn't get it. So why am I sharing this story with you? Because it is painful. Now, I really get how painful violence is. And I really, really, really get it. And because I really, really get how painful violence is, I would never in my life be violent to another human being. But I think it is important that we all get it, young and old, because there's way too much violence. In the United States, we are the most violent first world nation in the world. 75 kids get shot every single day. 16 die. The rest end up in wheelchairs. And if that was not a travesty every single day in our country, 237 plus kids ages 13 through 19, are arrested for a violent crime where there is a weapon involved every single day. We are maybe 4% of the world's population, but we have 25% of the world's prisoners. And when it comes to violence, we are terrible role models. Much like the water supply day we talked about, the rest of the world is doing a lot better job at this than we are. The Economist, which I'm sure some of you read, it's a reputable magazine. They took 25 first world countries in the world, like Germany, France, England, Australia, Canada, Japan, and they added all the kids that die in those 25 countries as a result of gun violence, and they took the total and multiplied that by 11. That is how many we lose in the United States of America. And that's not good. Because we are the only superpower, the richest nation in the world, although that may be shifting. And because we are the only superpower and the richest nation in the world, we have a tremendous impact on the global culture. If you travel overseas, what do you see? Starbucks, KFC, Levi's, American music, American movies. So what happens in the United States of America eventually happens in the world. And we are exporting our violence, as you see more and more stories like the one in Norway, which is not a violent country. So I didn't do this work. I worked as an international investment banker when my son was alive. Routinely, I came in from London, changed suitcases, and flew to Tokyo. And I really lived in a different world. I didn't even know there were such things as youth gangs. And because Tariq was killed by a gang member, I got into this issue and asked some very basic and fundamental questions like, why do our kids join gangs? And the answers I got horrified me. I was told they join gangs because they get respect by their peers. Like, I'm a macho guy, I'm a tough guy. Many peers will copy the gang members in terms of clothing and behavior. But I was told they join gangs because they live in a certain part of our city. They join gangs because if they don't join gang A, they are targeted by gang B. So they essentially join for protection. Or they join a gang because they don't have a sense of belonging. And having done this work for 19 years, I can tell you I've met gang members that are third to fourth generations of gang members. So essentially, they were born into that tradition. So I took a different response to this tragedy. As Albert Schweitzer says, it's not important what you look at. What's important is what you see. And what I saw here was there were victims at both ends of the gun. I saw that my son was a victim of the 14-year-old. I saw the 14-year-old gang member a victim of society, of American society. And that begs the question, well, who is American society? Well, it's you and me. Societies do not just happenstance. Every one of us who is an American is responsible for the society that we have created. We like to think we are a civil society. But children killing children, in my humble opinion, is not a mark of a civil society. So 9 months after Tariq died, I founded the Tariq Khamisa Foundation. Our mission statement is to stop kids from killing kids by breaking the cycle of youth violence. And we essentially have 3 mandates. Our first and foremost mandate is to save lives of children. We lose way too many. Think about Sandy Hook. We just had an anniversary. 5, 6, 7-year-olds were killed. It doesn't have to be your child that dies. When a child dies in any community, we're all diminished. Our second mandate is to empower the right choices so kids don't end up in gangs and guns and violence, and drugs and alcohol. And our third mandate is to teach the principles of nonviolence, of empathy, of compassion, of open hearts, of forgiveness, and most importantly, of peacemaking. And soon after I started the foundation, I asked the district attorney who handled my case to introduce me to the grandfather and guardian of my son's killer, and you met him on the video, with the perspective that we both lost a child. I told him I'm not here in the spirit of anger and revenge and retribution. Rather, what I really see here is we both lost a son. My son passed away. He's gone forever, and you lost your grandson, although it was like a son to him because he lived with his grandfather and calls him daddy, to the adult criminal justice system. He was the first 14-year-old in our state of California to be tried as an adult. It's a landmark case. There's nothing I can do to bring my son back from the dead. He's gone. And there's nothing you can do to get your grandson out of prison because it's not in your hands now. He's in the hands of the criminal justice system. And I've started this foundation with a very lofty mission of stopping kids from killing kids. It's a big job. I can't do this by myself. And the reason that I'm reaching out to you is to ask for your help. Because it behooves us to work together After all, it was your grandson that took the life of my son, and the one thing you and I can do is to make certain that no other young person in our community ends up dead like my son or ends up in prison like your grandson. That we can do. Will you help me? He was very quick to take my hand of forgiveness. And fast forward 19 years, we're still together. I would never have met him had his grandson not killed my son, and we are brothers. We are water bearers. I help him carry his load. He helps me carry my load. We are very different. He's Baptist, he's a Christian Baptist. I'm a Sufi Muslim. He's African American, although I always kid about that. I always tell him, players, I'm the African American in this group, not you, because I was born in Africa, you were not. And his grandson killed my son, and we are together, and we will be together doing this work for the rest of our lives. I started the foundation with very modest capital, about $8,000 in my home office. And fast forward today, we are over 45 employees, and we have created what we call a safe school model, which comprises of 5 different programs. And I don't have a lot of time to go into all of these programs, but essentially we have an assembly, we have an in-class curriculum. We also have after-school groups that deal with issues of drugs and alcohols and teen pregnancies and a lot of the stuff that gets kids into gangs. We have service learning projects where the kids actually go out and do service learning projects in the community. And then we have a mentoring program for the challenging kids. We are very middle school based. Tony, who killed my son, joined the gang in 6th grade. And what we find in typical schools in my community, there are about 1,000 kids in middle schools. Between 8 and 12% of those kids are the challenging kids. And we hook them up with AmeriCorps mentors. And they work with the kids not only in the classroom, but they also work with them in the community as well as in their own homes. And once you turn that population around, we've taken schools that are highly violent, that are gang infested, that are failing on all state and federal standards. In 3 years, we get rid of the gangs. We make sure that we cut expulsions and suspensions by 80%. And now that they're not only meeting state and federal standards, they're actually excelling. And what's most exciting for me in having done this work for 19 years is that not only are these principles of nonviolence teachable, our kids are hungry for them. I've given 1,000 presentations, have over 200,000 letters from kids. Spoke to 1 million kids. And I know that they are getting these principles. So it is exciting to me, isn't it, to know that our kids are hungry for these tenets of nonviolence. 5 years after Tariq passed away, I went to meet the young man who killed my son. He was 19 years old. And I knew that for me to at some point finish my journey of forgiveness, that I had to come eyeball to eyeball with him, which is hard to do. I'm sure you can relate to that. And that was a very transformative moment for both him and I. I remember I was sitting very close to him, right across a coffee table, looking in his eyes. And during that hour and a half that I was with him, man to man, our eyeballs locked. I'm looking at his eyes, and he's looking in my eyes, and I was able to look through his eyes and touch his humanity. Sure, he had done the worst possible thing you can do, is to kill an unarmed, innocent human being. but that did not make him inhuman. In fact, I could tell that my forgiveness had made a big difference in his life because he was well-spoken, he was articulate, he was remorseful. At that point, I told him, Tony, not only have I forgiven you, I want you to know that when you come out of prison, you have a job at the Khamisa Foundation and you can come work with your grandfather and me. And the next day, the grandfather called me and said, Azim, that meeting you had with Tony was very transformative for him. And I said, I don't know why I waited 5 years. It was also very transformative for me. And I wish I had done this before. He says, as you were leaving, Tony said to me, Daddy, there's a very special person. I've killed his one and only son. Not only has he forgiven me, he's offered me a job. I'm not worthy of his forgiveness. I'm not worthy of his job offer. But I'm going to try. He's 33 years old now. He aced his GED in prison when he was 22 years old. He's 12 units away from his first degree in child psychology, and he wrote the foreword to my 4th book. And I know that we've saved him, but think about how many he will save when he's on stage. Unfortunately, he's still in prison. I'm trying to get him out. I couldn't do that with our past administration, our lovable governor, as we called him. But I see more heart in Jerry Brown here, so hopefully we can get him out so he can join us, because I know he will save many more kids with his testimony. Maybe you guys will pray that we can get him out. So my time is short. And I wanted to, we're talking about peace. As you can tell, the portal of my journey was through forgiveness. And my last book, my first was from murder to forgiveness, forgiveness to fulfillment. This one is from fulfillment to peace. And it's based on this quote I made in my journal after 9/11. I'm sure everybody knows exactly where they were on 9/11. And it's heavy on our hearts. It's a little bit heavier on my heart because I am a practicing Muslim, and the perpetrators of this atrocity were from my faith. It's not the faith, I can assure you, because the same faith helped me to get to forgiveness. It's politics. That's a separate conversation. But I went into this very introspective space after 9/11, and 6 months later what came out is this particular quote, which is the basis of my 4th book, and I'd like to finish my address with this quote. So it goes like this: sustained goodwill creates friendship. It starts there, by extending goodwill. And that ought to be obvious. You make friends by extending goodwill, not bombing them. So sustained goodwill creates friendship. Sustained friendship creates trust. Sustained trust creates empathy. Sustained empathy creates compassion. And sustained compassion creates peace. So I call this my peace formula. It starts with goodwill, friendship, trust, empathy, compassion, peace. But I get asked a lot, how do you extend goodwill to the person who murdered your child? And I tell them, you do that through forgiveness. As it's evident it worked for me, it worked for my family. What is a miracle, it worked for him. And it worked for his family. It can work for you, and you, and you, and you, and your families. Indeed, it can work for Israel and Palestine, North and South Korea, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. It can work for the United States of America, and indeed, it can work for our planet. So my sisters and brothers, let me leave you with this, that peace is possible. How do I know that? Because I am at peace. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.